Hello, I'm Leo Dess with the Access Control Executive Brief. Our next episode, we'll discover how security can transcend traditional boundaries to become a true strategic enabler. You'll gain insights into how security can support core business functions, enable digital transformation, and create new revenue opportunities. The ability to do more. If you don't mind, introduce yourself, your background, like what got you into the seat that you're currently in right now, and I'll jump into the first question after that.
Yeah, so keen history of my time in the industry. I'm 28 years in with Gallagher, or with Cardex prior, that Gallagher purchased. Started off as a software engineer coming straight out of university, where I was dual business and information systems trained. Flowed pretty quickly through into business analyst roles, imagining what's possible for future generations of product. And then I was fortunate enough to run our products program for quite some time, more than a decade. Skipped through a little bit longer then and ran the security division for a number of years through a nice transformation and a good uptick period, and then got the privilege of running the Gallagher group of companies as CEO and executive director. So there you go, 28 years and 1 minute.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Just question: Do you take yourself as an engineer that knows business, or a business person that has an engineering background? Like, how do you view your currently role? Because it's, everyone comes to this place that they're at in a different way. How do you view yourself?
Yeah, I often introduce myself as a mostly recovered engineer, because you can never lose that passion. But what we often refer to and what we're looking for is, if we have people that are in tech roles, we say we want business savvy tech people. And if we've got business people, we want tech savvy business people. So I think that it's a really critical factor in how you pick your people and how you design your teams. It's really important to be able to play in both camps, especially in this changing world.
Yeah, especially nowadays, it is definitely it's an advantage having those. But it's also like the mindset of how you approach problems, the way that maybe you solve some things. I'm sure you go back to some of the basics that you learned in the engineering side to tackle business problems. On that, I mean, there's a little bit of the questions that I wanted to ask you to have the conversation around there is a bit about that. So if you were to take a look back over the times, you said you've been within the company 20 plus years on that. I mean, you've seen a lot that's come through. And as we start to talk about this idea around the ability to do more and this sort of strategic enablement, allowing it to happen, transcendence as we're calling it. It's like, what are those key industry changes that have shaped the path to get us to here? Because it's not like we woke up one day and it's all of a sudden just changed. There are steps that have happened to get us to the point where it's allowed for this thing to happen. So what are some of those key industry changes that you've seen?
Yeah. Well, we all know the industry changes. Security industry traditionally came from locksmiths, mechanical, then electrical came into it with us wiring up the locks and making those work together. And we had intruder, and then those things started to converge together, which is kind of useful. And we all know then 18 years ago, the whole IT convergence things came along, and traditional security technology, which is still, managed by our traditional security managers, whether they come from military, whether they come from police, or later on where they came from facilities, was an interesting reality and an interesting mode. And it was great because we were able to, replace master keys and have that kind of value. And we were able to automate a whole lot of mechanical stuff with electrical things that made some efficiency points. But I'm remembering Sir William Gallagher right back when I was really young going, do you know what? The security department's got a budget that's just a little bit larger than the janitors. They don't have a great deal of strategic influence. And he's always a wonderful proponent of just imagining how things could be. So what was really interesting in that next phase as the IT convergence started coming through, and it's been over talk, so I'm not going to spend much time on it, but it's a segue through to where things should be. It was obvious that getting security technologies onto IT networks was going to be a huge enabler because it increased the accessibility. It increased the access to more budget as the IT people started getting involved, and they could understand and manage software and things like that, which was interesting. But you were still just running traditional security things in a more enabled IT way. we had this belief and we had this thought, right, it must be 20 years ago, that said, you know what, how amazing would it be if we could use this technology stack, particularly with access control? We know who goes where, and what if we could help organizations use that tech stack to do a lot more and to deliver value well outside of traditional security? So I thought that was a really interesting I wonder point that we had, and it was about that time that we were learning how to become a design thinking organization. And I think this is a really interesting capability. It's not just a mind shift, it's a skill set. It's a skill set that you get from business analysts are trained, industrial designers, architects are trained to observe the world how it is, but also to observe the world how it could be. And I think that's really interesting. So at the same time where we saw the early days of Microsoft, we saw the early days of design with Apple and things like that coming through, we saw the world trying to take a design approach to things. And I think that in combination with imagining what else could security technologies do was a really interesting inflection point, and I think started this whole trend that we're seeing. So we're about 15 years into this, what else can security do in anger, and actually having products in market. So I think that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, no. So can I unpack that just a little bit too on that?
Yeah,
So if we take a step back to the 15 years ago on
yeah.
that end, that wasn't the conventional thought, like you were saying.
Glad
So if I was
no.
to tie it to just Gallagher for a moment, is what allowed, like what was happening, or what was the culture that was created to allow that? Because a lot of times within our industry, that's not allowed, right? It's sort of like our value was to keep bad people out, lock and unlock. And frankly, it was, if we did that well, everything was fine. But you mentioned this idea, this designed thinking coming in. Now, I know that was a trend at one point, but I don't think it was 15
Yeah.
years ago where that was a trend that was showing up
Yes.
in a lot of places. So what was happening that allowed that to be permission, if you would, empowerment to be
Yeah.
able to think that way?
Yeah. Yeah, sure. It was a cultural element. The wonderful thing about the organization that we've come through, we've always been owned by an entrepreneur. So there's an entrepreneurial mindset here. What I love about entrepreneurs is they're more afraid to not try something new and to miss an opportunity than to try and fail, which I think is a really interesting analogy for the industry as well. So if you take an entrepreneur's mindset where you embed the expectation to adapt, the expectation to think differently, you encourage creativity, and you encourage open trust where you partner for benefit, not for personal gain, if you know what I mean. So those cultural elements there, which came from the founders, like we're an 85-year-old organization, and the Access Control was purchased from another private organization that was also founded in 1938. So these values that come through over the years enable us to think differently, give us the room to think differently. And I think that's a very special thing that has come through. And I'm only the third CEO in those 85 years at Gallagher. And having those values coming through from the founder and being so embedded in our people just creates the environment where people can imagine.
Nice. And I don't want to extrapolate and go, say something that may not be true, but I remember one of the things that stood out to me when I visited with you all was the story around 8-wire. Am I saying it properly? Like the cable and the wire that back in the day that is used, is it called 8? Is it called 8-wire? Is it? I don't know.
It's called number 8-wire.
Number
Yeah.
8-wire.
It's a
Okay,
Kiwi
so
thing.
I was close.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's as you were saying it, I'm reminded the entrepreneurial spirit plus the ability to solve, from the story at least that was told to me, is that it is the equivalent, like here in the States, we use duct tape for everything. If you can't solve it, just take duct tape to everything. But that mentality of being allowed to think creatively, and so almost the expectation was set to do so, plus this sort of number 8-wire mentality of like getting it done type of a thing where you just attacked problems would allow for the thought leadership. I also believe that the being a privately held organization also allows some of those things to happen because you can focus on your stakeholders, if you would, which are typically the customer base versus shareholders in a lot of ways, allowing you to do that. And there's some commonalities across organizations where this ability to create strategic enablement of thinking about how we can solve more problems actually happens.
Yeah, and I think you're right on that one. And the other thing you get with the private organisations, you can take a very long view, and some large industry shifts take decades, and you'd have to have the patience to be able to do that. So I think that's a key strength of taking a long-term view as a key mindset as well.
Yeah, so something you said too that stuck out to me was the budget of the security department changing into the IT side. It's always interesting to me because if you think about the level of value that we deliver of keeping people safe, in a lot of ways, was never matched with the budget to do that, right? So by it moving over to the IT side, there seems to be an opening of budget, or at least an approach to the budget that's a bit different, that is getting closer to, maybe still not equal to, but closer to what it would take to allow for us to create. And I wonder at that point too, if we tie this back to the enablement side of being able to do more, those budgets are probably going to have to increase a bit to allow some of these things to happen. But there's a balance too, I think, of building them in a certain expectation that they deliver value to be able to do more.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there's an interesting next shift as well, because when we asked ourselves the question, how might this technology be able to do a lot more? We were thinking well beyond IS and the IT infrastructure, and thinking to the whole organization. And for example, IS budget's bigger than others, but it's still an enablement budget. It's still an infrastructure budget, and still, if you're at the board and if you're at the executive level, it's only recently when cyber has come in do they get the budgets they really deserve as well. So if we think about accessing or delivering value that is true whole of organization, I think this is where the catalyst of the shift changed. And I might just share a little origin story for us in this area. So rewind all the way back more than 15 years in the early 2000s, we had one or two mining customers, and you'll hear from the other podcast examples of mining. So this is how it started. It was an interesting industry shift. It was the rise of health and safety being compliantly required that was going through industry and going through mining, and it was prior to that was not that structured about whether mines or how much mines had to do. And then the rise of the compliance, which was going to hold executives and managers all the way up the chain culpable. And that started to come in. So there were standards coming in, and there was in Western Australia, there was a mine, and there was a forward-thinking consultant that wrote specifications that says, what if some of these safety features could be integrated into a security system? So we were much smaller back then. We had a crack at it. We put a tender in. We did our presentations. We actually lost the job and you'll smile when you hear this, to the incumbent who said they could achieve it. 12 months later, the incumbent did an achievement, but we'd actually taken a decision to build that stuff anyway. So we decided to, access control, who goes where, when. Okay, what are they wanting? They're wanting to speed up, inductions on site. 10, 20,000 people have to get on site real quick. People weren't getting on site because they weren't qualified or their certifications are expired. It was all paper-based. They couldn't do drug and alcohol testing on site to make sure that people were fit for work. They had really slow processes for clearing blast zones. So we thought, well, our access control, which is I think was the start of attribute access control. What if we then added and why you should go where you want to go to, your compliances and all of these things that aren't traditional based, but they're operational based. And all of a sudden, our security system became a health and safety, protective mitigative control. And not only that, it very quickly become a really big operational enhancement where they were blasting an extra time a day, and that's millions. They weren't having as many people turning up who shouldn't be working turned away, and they were having operational discontinuity. So then all of a sudden, if we talk about who is now interested in this conversation, The head of operations is interested. The head of corporate risk, not IT, head of corporate risk is now interested. The board is interested. HR are interested. And it was an interesting shift because it was an industry where and it was quite rare, where the emergency response team was also the security team. So they already had a really strong connection into the safety need. So it was a really interesting thing. So so it started off as a compliance need where the mines were doing it because they had to, but then it shifted really quickly to doing it because it's right, because they want people to go home safely. And that was just a really interesting shift from compliance and from risk and from fear and from doing the minimum to do it's right because it's purposefully right, and it actually makes money and it's operationally beneficial. And I think that was a turn in the industry. We've now got many, many hundreds of mines, and I didn't remember losing one for a long time in that process as a result of that. Added so much value.
Yeah, which leads me to thinking, if drawing, I would say, similarities and correlations to it's those stories can show up in many different ways. One of them being, if I think like in North America, there's a need for in the enterprise high levels of assurance, but then also convenience. So maybe the ROI on the convenience side a little bit different than the compliance end, and then also the safety. But it's sort of that there's a yin and a yang in some regards to where, or maybe it's in addition to the value create. Like we still want that core safety or compliance, whatever is the core value prop, but then we want additional on top of. So this doing more and that you're talking about is actually about, I want something that gives me a core value proposition, but then also allows for other things to happen versus having point solutions doing all of the individual ROI type of things that I'm going to want them to go do. Is that so? It's not just the expectation of it doing more, it's the expectation, it sounds like, of the customer also expecting it to do more.
Yeah, and I think it's still interesting though because you get some lead industries that are driven by something. It's usually something that you're forced to do first. They're there.
Yeah.
Once you do it, becomes a good idea, and then you actually get more ethereal on it, and actually say it's actually a bit more purpose driven and a bit more humanistic, and there's a lot more value to that as well. But I still wonder in the customers that are using security systems, what percentage of them are actually even realizing security tech can do this, which is why I'm loving this podcast series, because we refer to it as the other 90% of value not yet created, even in our good customers who know it. And the other 90, and we don't even know if it's another 90% because we haven't spent the full amount of time with all of the customers, especially the ones we don't have, to really understand what other whole of organization process optimization could be possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, there's an aspect of just we have not unleashed the imagination of asking the questions to go do it. And I do think it's because in some regards, you mentioned it already, in some of these areas, it's a binary decision of safe or unsafe. And the risk is so high that if it's unsafe, that some people don't want to have that risk. They just leave it alone. And it's also, I think, because we've been somewhat of a predictable industry, it's like, if it's not broken, don't fix it. That's why I'm thrilled to be having these conversations with you, because then that's like the impetus of a lot of the stuff that we like to do is just to have the conversation and do it. Because like if we talk about it, ideate on it, start to just smash some things together, we might find out. A great example, in my opinion, of that is how we lacked imagination as an industry around visitor management. Like it was always just seen as like a compliance tool or a clipboard digital, when I feel like through COVID coming out of it, when you couldn't go to your buildings and utilize the card, which was an analog, and your buildings were basically analog, but now I needed to move that thing into the house, and people were doing like health attestation apps and stuff like that. There was an aspect of it is like it became a digital interface, and the imagination actually kind of went nuts outside of our industry in some respects. So it makes me wonder what other areas within our industry that we haven't done what else can we do? It's actually what concerns me with a little bit about how we've been approaching mobile, with the idea that we've been treating it almost as a card in the phone. It's like our imagination has gone as wild as digitizing the analog card that we've had, where it's like, well, what else could it do? And that, again,
Yeah.
like Can you do operational efficiencies? How about some revenue generation? Like all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's right because that's happened in the industry all the time. We've taken something quite mechanical or quite physical and just put it on another platform, but does the same thing. That's this how the IT integration happened for most of the industry as well. And I think you're really interesting if you start imagining what mobile could be. Mobile is an amazing. It's an opportunity to interact on everything all the time with what you have. So yeah, sure, there's an access control. Yeah, sure, we can get all kinds of e-credentials going, and you can have multiple credentials which can link to, allow your mobile phone can be your link between all these disparate systems, and it's wonderful. And but then you start to think about the integration of emergency management and the same experience. Then, are you okay? Where are you? Optimization. I'm looking for another resource in this area. Someone's just turned up. They've injured themselves. Get it in. So how can it actually become a deeply integrated operation, a critical operational communication system as well? Because we've got the mass communications for the emergency, which happens once in a while. Why not provide that same infrastructure rather than creating a separate one for communications you need every minute, every hour, every day, efficiently? And that's a really great question. And even just popping that question like that and creating forums to have these conversations, I think will be amazing. And we just got to make sure we have a lot of people in the room who aren't, or more people in the room who aren't security actually, and more people who are in different departments in the business, or even board members. Yeah, wouldn't it be great if board members and CPOs and data architects and not are coming to the shows, because I still see a small number of C-levels coming to some of the shows. Yeah. It's great to see the increase, but we'll know we get it right when the chief people officer turns up, rather than just someone responsible from safety from their people team.
Yeah, well, and you're starting, I mean, the good news is I do think we're starting to see some of the enterprise software world take it. I've been kind of interested to see some of the parts that we find hard because that's not where we come from, but then they come from and they're thinking like for instance, automation in a lot of ways, right? Like it's not the traditional side of our industry is we integrate systems together. We're not necessarily automating them. And certain parts of the world come in, they're like, yeah, automation, I get that. I do that on a regular basis. So just by people banging into our stuff that are new voices and new ways of thinking and allowing the conversations to happen, and us just not saying, well, our industry, we're slow. Like we're slow to adopt, and you don't want to do that. It could be, you may be making it unsafe, but just like the art of the possible conversation, like maybe we don't do all of it, but at least there's the idea and the hope that we're thinking about it. And then, I don't know, you mentioned notifications. I think that's a wonderful example of an area that we have, as an industry, we've done mustering. And like we think of it as mustering, but like you said, there's probably some things from other areas that handle notifications. Like I think about how I get notifications from a lot of the applications that I use from a consumer side that are, I mean, granted, there's a lot of noise in some of them that makes them not that useful. But then there's plenty where that, it would be nice if maybe my systems showed up from an access control standpoint the same way. I don't know. I don't have the answer either, to be honest with you. Some people may know better than I would. Real quick, so I wanted to ask you about, you had some stories you were talking about on the mining side. If you have any other examples, I'd love to hear, because I do think that these things are very contextual and they help on that end. And then maybe you mentioned the CEO, and I know this is how people, you can know we do this stuff live. On that end, I want to ask, as a CEO and someone that deals with the board, I mean, is that, are you thinking about it that way yourself? Like, because you're almost, we have I don't know if this terminology works, but we call it here eating your own dog food in a lot of ways, right? Like this idea that you're self-consuming the ideas, not waiting for customers to do it. So do you have any examples of that, or can you give some insight maybe in how you as a leader of a very large organization globally is looking at their own systems to help you?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting as you go. So first of all, do we what do we see and feel as a board? Because I'm the CEO and on the board as well. So Great. So right inside those conversations of how those are operating. So I might just touch on what we're talking about at the board in general, because I think that can help. Because what we're talking about at our board is, I think, what many customers are talking about at their boards, and it creates some relevance to get even more impetus of what's going on here, which I think is important. Yeah. So you hit any boards at the moment, they're gonna have cyber on their list, which is wonderfully useful for us, of course, as an industry, because of course the protection's gone through the roof on the need for cyber defensiveness and all those kind of things. So that's very, very important. So from our perspective, because we are a provider of national security interest things in the Five Eyes countries, and we are very, very highly certified, then that is very important to us. So it's wonderful having our very highly certified devices that are very, very capable of defending edge attacks and making sure they're incredibly secure. So yep, absolutely eating our own dog food with that around the world. That's amazingly important. So that cyber thing is so important. You'll be able to walk in the door on any organization, any board, and say, I've got something for your cyber. You might not know, and you'll get that conversation. Also, we're still talking about safety, and even more so people safety, not only from a mechanical perspective and from a physical perspective, and falling from height, transport, all those traditional things, but the rise of psychosocial safety as well, and making sure people are okay and feeling okay. And that links very strongly to your operational productivity and things like that, to make sure that you're not overburning and burning out your people, and you're identifying bottlenecks as well. So we're seeing opportunities with how we overlay what data can we get from the access control systems to know that our people are productive, they're coming to work, there's no signals of where they might be unwell, i.e. absenteeism and things like that. So we're triangulating quite a bit on those kind of things as well. So I just wanted to share that the rise of psychosocial and how that overlays with operational factors is really important. And of course, everyone at the moment is talking about, whenever there's economic risk, everyone flops to productivity, efficiency, and those kind of things. So absolutely, we're thinking as a board about how we can be the most operationally efficient organisation possible. And there's a really interesting thing here that I've just realised as we're doing a massive ERP transformation for ourselves as well internally. When we and I think about how we go about doing these projects in the industry. So we talk about, okay, there's lots of departments, there's lots of interdepartmental value to be had. If we all just get everybody in the room, get the people and the IT people and everyone in the room, and magical things happen, and we find these value points, and we do find them. But I just wonder if there's a thing about organizational design here that's been on my mind in the customers, or as an industry, that we can understand about how we can go in and actually be successful. So we've got external consultants coming in because we're upgrading our SAP system and all the things that go around that tech architecture. And the first thing they said is, you got two choices. You could actually run this from within your IT department, and sort of business partner of all the other business processes can kind of be a tack on and come in, or you can create a genuinely independent, spun up center of excellence team, which is cross-functional, which has them all in with an equal voice. Now, this is just how you do ERP now. If we were still going through security departments and security things or IT things off to the side, I wonder how we might organize ourselves as an industry now with this knowledge. And I think this is a real turning point for the industry, that if we can get ourselves inside those ERP and those ERP cross-functional teams who are responsible for creating cross-functional value, optimizing and standardizing processes across organization, there's a lot of gold in there that's going to be found as people upgrade their old technologies. So that's with our ERP upgrade, that's how I'm thinking, and we're thinking here with what could we do with the security thing, even more than what it traditionally does. So probably a little bit different answer to what you expected, but I think it's a way to get into organizations to actually make this come even more true.
Well, so it's not outside of a lot of the areas where I'm thinking. Because so first off, last brief I wrote, Gallup came out with their new workplace study globally, and they talked about the well-being of people and where they're at in our, if the customers are thinking about these things and they become even like, we should, as an industry, be showing up in those areas because that's where the mind frame is, especially if we want, like we're saying, garnering more of, say, the pie. If because we've done such a good job, in my opinion, of keeping people safe physically, there isn't a need to necessarily update anything as far like a need, right? Theoretically. But if we could start getting deeper into areas where people are spending their time, especially at the board level, it's amazing the projects I think we can, but we can't fake it into that area either. These things need to be built for those reasons. The second thing that you said that resonated for me is I think what we're talking about is it's almost like how do we forget what we've known, but yet not forget it and apply it moving forward? It's I jokingly call it the Men in Black thing where they took that pen, right, and they put it in front of their face and it erases their head and then they go. If you think about it, they don't necessarily forget everything, but they there's a period of time that they forget, but they're able to still continue to function with some core understandings or beliefs. And I do think as the industry goes beyond the traditional locking, unlocking, keeping bad people out, and we move to this idea of letting the right people in and the operational efficiencies, revenue generation, all the things that you're talking about happening with an ERP, there's some foundational stuff that gives us permission as an industry because we keep people safe, we deliver value and a utility, but there's all this plus. And the biggest thing that gets in our way is what we've been talking about through this series is the imagination and the ability to think about this in that manner to where it's allowed to do more. And if we allow ourselves to play in those areas, I think it's a much bigger marketplace than the historical $10 billion industry that we've done a pretty good job in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I fully agree. And, if we think about mindsets to unlock or those things to neuralize out of ourselves that might be holding us back, there's some things that are already moving. And I think a really big enabler and a big shift that I could have mentioned right back at the beginning of what shifts have enabled things. You know, we all know about we can connect systems now, we can make them interoperable, there's open standards and things like that. But I think there's a really big shift that has happened in those who are successful and needs to happen across the entire industry. And this is that the belief that the data that is flowing and the data that exists is actually owned by the customers and the customers only is really, really interesting. So, and I think this also links to the fact that the last 10, 20, 30 years, we in the industry have really focused on outcompeting with each other. What I'm sharing with the team is we will win, and those will win in the future who out-partner people. And, getting past the egos of what's my boundaries, getting past it's my data, I'm going to hold it. There's been many times and many decades over the past, we're thankfully gone now, where customers have been held hostage and things like that. So I think this, not only the technology that's open and interoperable, the data interchange has to flow. We have to work out how to partner in the industry really openly, but then have the skills to partner cross-departmental in the customer to have the value happen as well. So I think those are, that's a couple of things that I think we could neuralize out or keep going in the right way, because it's definitely going the right way, but it's something that wasn't there a long time ago, like 20 years ago, and something that their customers are expecting. I'm quite excited by it.
Yeah, no, I would call that a call to action more than anything of what you said there, because I think the expectations of what our systems do by the customers changing, and they're starting to think about the art of the possible around it, and we need to as well. And with that, some old truths are going to need to go away. Some new truths will be introduced along the way, and there's a better expectation of how we are to perform in the marketplace when it comes to that. I could do this for hours on my end. My hope is that this is the beginning of an ongoing dialogue from folks like yourself, especially you. It would be great. I would love to have the opportunity to do more of these, especially as things unfold and you start to see the outcomes that come from like the ERP that you're doing and seeing customers that have seen this series as a call to action, also in permission, or maybe finally feeling that there's a place that they can go express themselves to go have these conversations and create these areas. I think it shows the importance and how you find it from a cultural standpoint that you would take the time to go do this and work with the team to allow this conversation to happen from the top of the organization all the way down. So it's, in my opinion, it's wonderful leadership, and I appreciate you making the time and the opportunity for this to happen, because without that, I don't know if people would feel that they could.
Well, thank you very much, and absolutely my pleasure to continue the conversation. And you know what, as an industry, the industry grows when we all grow. You know, without a very large number of people moving in the same direction, you don't actually have a mega shift. And I'll just leave one thought here, as perhaps a mindset thing as well. That I just thought about this morning over my morning coffee, which was we describe ourselves as an industry. Which is interesting. If we put ourselves into a customer mindset and actually shift it from our industry focus, which we've come from, which is perhaps could be a bit insular if we call ourselves an industry in itself, okay. But we think about the enterprise value in organizations. So how are we part of their world? How are we part of their value that they're creating? And perhaps describing ourselves as an industry might evaporate over time. I don't know. That's an interesting thought.
No,
yeah.
I believe it's funny. Yeah, I can go for hours. But if you think about it, of who we serve and the way that we think about ourselves as products and how they go to market, I would agree with you there. The way we view ourselves has to shift too to match where we want to be, and who we want to be, and probably where the customer wants. And we probably limit ourselves based off of how we define certain things. And calling ourselves an industry might be one of those areas that would need a reimagination as well of how we do that. I'm not often lost with words, but that might be one of those areas where I would need to noodle that one and maybe come back to you with my thoughts that if it's not that, what is it, right? So
yeah, and how have we describe ourselves is not the point. The
Sure.
wonderful mega shift that's happening is we're all thinking about customers. We're all thinking about ridiculous customer value that can be delivered well outside of security. We're all going in the right direction. It's amazing. It's an exciting industry to be part of. Thank you for your leadership, for creating this podcast and creating a voice. Really proud to be part of it in the future. Let's keep talking.
No, absolutely. All right, Kahl. Thank you very much. Thank you for watching, and share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. And remember, let's go do more.